level.
James Blake, it is an honor to have you on. You were the #1 American tennis player for the ATP Tour. You won 10 titles on the ATP Tour. You were 4 in the world, and you were People's Magazine's sexiest male athlete.
A long time ago. Way before a lot of
You still got it. You still got it.
No.
So, man, I have so many questions. I have like lists and lists and lists of questions, but we kind of, I actually never met you, but we kind of grew up together, like adjacently, because one of my first boyfriends, Graydon Oliver, you roomed with, and
yes.
So wait, where were you from?
I grew up in Connecticut, so we're fellow New Englanders playing in back then at Nelta, and so played tons in Massachusetts and everything, and then ended up going to school in Massachusetts as well. So I stayed in New England for a while until it was time to turn pro, and so I moved down to Tampa, and Graydon Oliver moved in while he was trying to become a double star.
Oh my God, that's right. What is the craziest story from that period that you remember?
From Graydon?
Yeah.
Graydon was I don't know. I don't want to speak too much out of school, but I think he'll get a kick out of just being funny. But he was the first person I ever saw to use things like eBay. So that's how far back we go.
Oh my God.
We used to get these really nice presents on tour. You know, you go to a tournament and they give you back then maybe an iPod or I don't know, some sort of electronics, a speaker system, whatever. They give you the nice things. And eventually you're playing 20, 25 tournaments a year. You don't need 20 iPods. So He was the first person I ever saw that would come home and immediately get on the computer and be like, oh, I'm going to sell this and make $200 extra or something for doing this. Because back then, even now, actually, doubles players don't get paid quite as much sometimes. So a way to supplement their income was, so he was the first person I ever saw do that. And I was like, that's amazing. You're so, so entrepreneurial to take all these free gifts that we're getting and turn it into extra cash.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. And then you also know Greg, who's become a dear friend who I just adore, and who's, how did you know Greg? Shout out to Greg Royce, who connected us.
Yeah, I knew Greg Royce so I was not very good in the 12s and 14s because I was tiny, and Greg wasn't that big, but he was bigger than me, so able to overpower me, and he used to beat up on me in the 12s and 14s. So as you're improving in tennis generally, you're always looking for people better than you to play with, and my brother was probably very tired of beating up on me all the time because he's 3 years older than me and bigger and stronger and faster and better looking if you ask him. But I would play with Greg. Once I got my license around when I was 16, I was able to drive, and I would meet him halfway. He was in New York, I was in Connecticut. We were about an hour away. And so we'd meet and practice once a week.
That's amazing.
It was great to have someone that was that level to beat up on me for a while. And it was right around the time where I started kind of getting a little bit better. And so we were having really good practices, and it was a lot of fun. So it was a good time in my life. And then we ended up going to rival colleges. He went to Yale, I went to Harvard. So we would see each other when we played them.
Yeah. And what was the junior experience for you? So I finally got around to watching the Will Smith, King Richard. I was in the movie. I had a scene with Will. I played funny enough, I was auditioning, and I was like, this is my life. Do you understand? Like, I know Rick Macy's, like, I know all these people, like, I grew up with this was my childhood. I moved to Everett Tennis Academy and, you know, to Florida. Like, this was my life. I know the ins and outs of this. And they're like, you got the job, basically. It was like literally just walked in and even though I'm playing like a New York Times reporter, unfortunately, when I looked at the script, I was like, this scene is definitely getting cut. But I had an amazing scene with Will. It was like, the scene was like me trying to have to like win him over, and he's kind of like iffy and kind of like, and it was a really great, like, it was really awesome to work on that film, but I could never watch it because it went on to win Oscars and I was just like, oh God, this kills me. I missed all the fun Oscar parties and I didn't even get to go to the premiere. And so I was like, I don't want to watch this. Finally watched it. And when I first read the script, it talked about how Richard Williams didn't want his kids, Serena and Venus, in junior tennis because it was so toxic, and all the kids were feeling this pressure, and all the parents were screaming at their kids, and it was just a quick montage of like, you know, him being so supportive and him just being like, you got it, and just believing like the sky is the limit, right? And then I mean, that movie just killed me, but especially that moment. I cried when I read that part in the script, and I cried watching this whole thing play out because that was juniors. It was insane. You have parents bullying you at 12, and like it's, you know, I think I had an experience where a woman got a line judge, but then the line judge was like harassing me and just sort of playing mind games, and like they were supposed to be at the net and they weren't at the net, and they were just following my every move. Like it was. And this was at Whiteman, by the way. Like this was like a big tournament. If people who don't know, Whiteman was like the biggest tournament to win in New England. And the next year I won it, but I like went from. But it was such a toxic environment. How did you move through those moments? And obviously, like you said, that you Greg was telling me also that it wasn't until. Probably you started, you know, growing up, and then, you know, growing into your body, and then you just like, and his coach was like, watch this kid. He's going to be huge. As soon as he like gets a growth spurt, like this kid is just off to the races.
Yeah, well, then he saw probably better than the USDA did, because they didn't. I got a call after I won the clay courts from one of their top coaches and said, this is the first time anyone's ever won a national surface tournament that I didn't even know who they were. So it was probably maybe a well-kept secret in New England and maybe in New York area that I was kind of up and coming. But for me, I saw so much of what you said. It's so accurate that there were toxic parents, and I was so lucky to have the parents that I do have, and that my coach was there to really help them, guide them through that process, because my dad very much stressed hard work. He took up tennis later in his life, so he definitely wasn't an authority on tennis, but he knew about hard work, and he really believed no matter what, any endeavor you take up, if you're the hardest worker, you're going to have the most success. And so he wanted me out on the court nonstop, just playing, no matter what, because he knew I loved it. And my coach had to kind of reel him back a little and say, look, hard work's great, and your son is going to do it, because my coach actually had to set rules for getting me off the court because I wanted to be on the court all the time. And so, but I saw parents that were putting so much pressure just on the result. That was the one thing that my dad was always awesome about, was that it was about hard work. You're getting better for later, but you're working hard. That's it. He never put pressure on me winning a match when I was 12, 14, 16, whatever. It was, you're getting better. And my mom was she actually knew tennis better because she played from when she was a kid, but she was just a nervous wreck watching her kids play. And I'm seeing that now. I have a 13-year-old daughter that's into tennis, and I see my wife getting so nervous, and I have to try to I try to calm down and just show that it's completely calm. She looks up at me and she says, Dad, how come when I look up at you, you just look like you're not doing anything? I was like, well, because I'm just trying to show you that it's better to be calm. And my mom had to learn that lesson. It was very difficult for her. She started knitting. She took up knitting so she could knit while she watched me play, because she was so racked by the nerves. But I see it when I was playing. When I turned pro, I was trained at Saddlebrook, and that was one of those academies where you've got so many of the toxic parents down there, and they're putting so much pressure on these kids. And it's really, really difficult to watch. And it's sad. I think it's actually kind of trickling into all junior sports, where they're expecting kids to specialize really young, expecting so much from them, results oriented. And that's the one thing that my dad was awesome about, was that it's not results oriented. You don't care if you won or lost. You did the right thing. You're on the right journey, and you're doing things that need to be done for later. And maybe that's why Greg's coach saw me and thought, okay, he's doing the right things. And, maybe saw the work ethic, maybe saw that if I did grow, which I never was sure that I was going to grow, but luckily I finally did. And then I did kind of take off, because my game was very aggressive, and I needed the size and strength to be able to be impactful on my opponents. So it took until I was about 16 or 17 years old for me to have any real success on a national scene.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? When I think about... So you go on to have this massive career and 4 in the world. And when I was watching, I had Marty Fish on the podcast as well, and we talked about his documentary. You know, I mean, like he's like family, you know, him and, you know, Tom Fish. I have like mutual friends who are like, I saw Tom play, you know, shout out to Tom Fish. But it's like, it's really interesting where I think if you're an athlete, and this probably makes sense. My father was also like he won the World Cup in rowing, and my dad, because he knew what it took, and he kind of fulfilled his dreams as like, an athlete. So there wasn't anything that he needed. He was just like, oh yeah, like this is like, you put in the work, and then, you know, and so I think that, what I've seen is like, for most athletes, it's sort of, there's this distance. And then I feel like when I watch like basketball games, it's like, or like the fans of basketball games, like the mix of what, you know, people are losing their minds and they're like, we won. Yeah. Now there is this relationship that when you're playing in the stands and when you have like, you know, this huge crowd, they can be sort of the wind beneath your wings, but they don't necessarily determine whether you're going to win or not, but they can definitely help. So there is sort of this like relationship that happens, but I think I almost liken it to sort of that sort of feeling of we won and we lost of like with their kids or who are, you know, in juniors of, you know, sort of having that mentality. Now, when you're top 4 in the world and you're having all the success, when, you know, I think about like Marty Fish's like documentary where Andy talks about like, in order to be like, you know, when you're the number 1 American, and I've seen, you know, Breakpoint with the new latest Americans, and like they feel this immense pressure because now they're not just winning for themselves, they're winning for all these other people, their agents, their, you know, their wife, their family, the coaches, the endorsements. How did you navigate through that immense pressure?
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't think about until I'm really proud of Marty for getting out there and speaking about it, about the pressures that go with it. In an individual sport especially, you don't have anyone you can tag in. You don't have any excuse afterwards. You don't have, you know, I made the pass and they didn't make the shot, or, the defense didn't hold us up or anything like that. It's just you out there. So the pressure is enormous. That's actually why I gravitated towards the sport, is because I really enjoyed that aspect of it, of it's all on my shoulders and I want the ball. So for a lot of the, you know, you think about the great athletes, great basketball players, they want the ball in clutch.
Michael Jordan
well, there's no other option in tennis.
Yeah.
You have the ball. It's all on you. So I love that feeling. But then what people discredit or maybe don't understand or appreciate until maybe seeing what Marty went through is that pressure doesn't go away. It's you finish the match and then you've got a press conference, and then the next day it's in the papers, on the news, whatever, and it's every day for that. You just had a bad loss, so now it's every day you got to think about that until the next week. So it's a matter of something else that people don't think about that has to be navigated, a hurdle in getting to be successful as a tennis player. And so for me, that took some time because I was very lucky to be in kind of the spot I was in. I mean, you always try to make the most out of any situation you're in. Marty and I came up at a very similar time, and it was Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras were the number 1 and 2, and Andy Roddick kind of shot to the top as well. And so I was kind of drafting behind Andy for a lot of my career. And then when I got up to the number 1 American, got up to number 4, Andy was still right there behind. And so we had a lot to talk about, to kind of talk through some of the things he was going through, some of the things I was going through. And I couldn't have had a better friend, and especially to go through with Marty. Marty also lived with me in Tampa for a while before he sort of broke through and got his own place. But we kind of did it together. And then it is isolating at times when you're out there and you're the number 1 American, and like you said, you're doing it for so many other things. And I really felt like the only time I felt real pressure on tour was the Olympics and Davis Cup. When they say Team USA or Advantage USA, Game USA, you know, okay, well, normally that's Game Blake, and that's something where I can accept that I'm representing my family. I can accept that I'm representing myself. but now I'm representing the entire country for Team USA. And that was a big honor because you know what it's like to be whatever you're ranked in the country in juniors. Like that was a big deal when you get to top 10 in juniors, and that's just in the country in your little age group. And now they're saying, wait a minute, you're the best out of everyone in the country right now. You're the top.
Crazy.
So we want you to represent us. That was a big thought. And one thing that you have on tour is time. You're getting treatment. That's sitting around time. You're in the gym. Then you're resting. You have to sleep a lot while you're on tour because you're recovering and doing all the things you need to do. So there is a lot of time to go through all the things that are going on and all the pressure that you face. So it's a lot, and I'm proud of Marty for what he said about it and how he dealt with it, because it's not easy. I mean, I've always said that I'm so amazed by what Roger, Rafa, and Novak went through, because they had targets on their back for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had that in a much smaller case when I was number one in the country in juniors and number one in the country in college. You got everyone gunning for you, and that's a lot. But to then do it with everyone in the world is gunning for you. That's a really tough spot to be in, and to always, for all three of them to handle it the way they have, really, really remarkable. And I don't know, I mean, we've given them so many accolades, so much adulation, but I still think it's underrated for what they've done mentally for the last 20 years.
Yeah, when I was watching that documentary, Breaking Point or Breakpoint with the new pros who are top in the world, and how like what it took for them, you know, each time where it's like they're just stuck like top 10 and they just can't crack it, and it's this it's a simple shift in like a mindset, you know, and you see Rafa, you see like Nadal, who just doesn't matter how far they're down, or Novak, like they're coming back. Like it's Djokovic. Like it's the mental toughness that I think they embody and that they have is that, like, you know, with Nadal, it's like no matter, like there was like a moment where I forget who it was, but it's Carlos, I think, who was like up and he was like just killing and he was crushing. And then next thing you know, it's like Nadal, then he was like, oh, like he just, it didn't matter how far, many sets, how 2 sets down, you know, it was like, I don't know, like 5-4 in the third, and he's coming back. Like it's just this mental toughness with like several match points.
The mental side of things is really what sets a lot apart. Obviously, to be at the top of the game, you have to have talent. You have to have a little bit of luck with staying healthy. You have to put in the work. But the mental side is really what can absolutely set you apart, and just how important it is. Because I know for sure there were people that were more talented than I was that never made it to top 10, that really might have never even made it to top 100, whether it be they had bad coaching, whether it be they couldn't deal with the pressure, whether it be they got unlucky with injuries, or just not having that confidence. There are players that I knew of, that Marty knew of, I'm sure, that would be unbelievable in practice. You want to practice with them, and they could push you to the absolute brink, and then you play them on tour, and
they would crack under the pressure.
They're shell of themselves, and it's just confidence. They don't have the ability to say, I can play that way when it counts, when the crowd's there, when the crowd's going, when the lights are on, when everything's more important.
I love it. Like, give me the ball.
They play way too safe a lot of times.
What was your mindset in those moments when the pressure is on? Like, what would you tell yourself? Was there a certain mantra? What would you say?
So for me, I love those moments, and I actually looked at those as almost like the dessert, like the fun part of the sport, because you put in the work. And that's when I would always say all the work I did on those practice courts, I know every shot I'm about to hit or I'm going to try, I've practiced thousands of times. So, and I've made it thousands of times. I've missed it plenty too in practice, but I've made it more times than I missed it. So I'm going to go out there and try to execute that exact shot that I've hit in practice. And if I don't, I'm going to give myself another chance to do it. And I just always wanted to rely on the preparation. That's why the only times I felt like I was uncomfortable out on the court were when I was coming back from injury and I really hadn't gotten myself back to doing all the preparation I was normally able to do.
Yep.
And then I felt uncomfortable because I just felt uneasy. I didn't have anything to fall back on saying like, oh no, I've done this work. Because if I felt like I was out of that rhythm, then I didn't feel that great out there on court. But anytime I put in the work, I absolutely that's actually when people ask me what I miss about being on tour. The only thing I probably miss is that feeling of starting a tournament when I know I've done every bit of preparation I can to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. That feeling is the best, because then you go out and you just lay it all on the line, and you win some, you lose some, but you go out and you did your best, the best you could.
Yeah. And what were those conversations with Andy or Marty about feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders? Like, what was the advice that either of them, or what you guys talked about to how to move through that?
Well, you had to just, for me, I wanted to try to make it feel normal, because I grew up going to a normal high school, going to prom, doing all that kind of stuff, and then going to college and focusing on studies. So to be in the pro sports world, it really wasn't normal. But I had to talk to Andy. Both Andy and Marty, went to more like the normal route of going to an academy. Andy and I both had an older brother that played. So we could see that, but Andy had success from a very young age, so he was already a part of that. So for me, it was about making it feel like this is what we were prepared for. This is what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason to add any extra pressure when we know there is this pressure put from the outside. So don't add any sort of internal pressure. Both Andy and I, so many times when we played Davis Cup and we were relying on each other, mm-hmm. we took those so much harder than we did for any of our other losses. And it meant so much when he's sort of drowning his sorrows, or he's so upset, that I would say, hey, I got you. I'm going to do my best to pick you up. And same the other way. When I would lose and he had done everything he could, he said, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. You did your best. We all know that you did your best. And so it made a huge difference that we both had each other's backs. And like when we played against each other, we wanted to beat each other's brains in. And in practice and matches, all the time we wanted to be. But then afterwards, we had each other's backs. We were. Yeah. If I lost in a tournament, I want Andy to win it. If Andy lost in a tournament, he's checking in every round. Hey, bud, keep going. Giving scouting reports. We could help each other with scouting reports. Although his was always terrible, because he would say, just serve 140 at the back end and it'll work. And I'm like, well, I can't exactly do that. But no, we always had each other's back, so it was great. And Marty the same. Marty was always just as helpful. And we weren't on as many Davis Cup teams together, but we always had each other's backs no matter what the situation was. And that made it feel more normal, because it made it feel like you were in more of a group, as opposed to just being totally isolated out there on tour. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Which can feel really, really isolating. The one thing, like when I was just doing juniors, like touring, like playing the Italian Open and just spending like a month in Italy, which was amazing. You think it sounds amazing. You're like, great, all the pasta. I'm like, oh my, holy shit, I just gained 15 pounds. How the hell did that happen? You're playing red clay. I have no business being on red fucking clay, because I'm thinking, I'm like, my back got injured. Like, it was just, it's so lonely and it's so depressing sometimes, especially like whether it's so much more fun when you're winning, but it's like, it's, but then it's also, the further you go like through the tournament, the less people are there and the less and less and less. So it continues to just be this isolating thing. So even if there's like a big group and there's a lot of people and it's fun and exciting, but then it can also feel just really exhausting. I don't know. How did you, did you manage the one-man band?
Yeah, it gets really lonely. And I still remember really vividly, that was a perfect description of my first time playing in Futures. So Futures, the absolute lowest level pro event. The first one I played when I finished my freshman year, and I decided, okay, this summer I'm going to play some Futures and see how I do. I had never played many pro events or anything. The only one I played was because I got a wild card into the U.S. Open qualies. I played that. But then, so the next summer I played the Future. First Future I played was in Waco, Texas. Not a great place to go. I know Baylor's there. They love it. But this was before Chip and Joanna. So it was a hole in the wall. They're more known for David Koresh than they were for Chip and Joanna. So Waco, Texas.
And what is that? So Chip and Joanna's? What is that?
Isn't that they've got the
Chippendales?
No, Chip and Joanna, they do the games. They do the home renovations, and they they're huge, some sort of huge business. I don't know, they basically have like their own network now, I think. But
I have no idea.
They redo a bunch of stuff in Waco. But anyway, I play, and there was this college All-American team, which my brother was on, a couple other friends of mine. The Bryans were there, Bob and Mike. So I had a whole group of people that were there that it was fun. So first round was great. I win. Still got a bunch of buddies. We're eating at $3.99 all you can eat pizza places, but whatever. We're staying at a Red Roof Inn, whatever. It's fine.
Terrible.
But we're doing that. And then I keep going, and everyone else is lost. So I'm in the semifinals, and there's nobody there to warm me up. So I'm just jumping rope and getting ready and going out and playing. And then I win the semis. I'm in the finals. I lose
oh my
the
God,
finals,
there was no one to play.
Nobody there. My brother, they'd all gone on to the next tournament.
And you wouldn't even ask your opponent, be like, hey, no, because he had his coach?
I don't remember, but I was so new to the tour that I basically didn't know anyone except for the other college guys. So I was too probably shy or just didn't think about it. So I was out there, and I was so alone for that semis and finals that I remember thinking, this might be my life. If I'm good enough to do this, I better love this.
Yeah.
And it got me to the point where, like, okay, I'm eating alone at a all-you-can-eat pizza buffet after the semifinals of this tiny tournament where there were 6 people watching. If I don't love this, I probably am never going to make it to anything substantial in this sport. And I said, it got me thinking about it, like, okay, I love it. I really do. I can't wait to get to the next tournament now still too. So I'm like, all right, this is kind of eye-opening because it could be really, really depressing if you're by yourself in a Red Roof Inn in Waco, Texas, and playing for, I don't know, about $400 or something to win the next day. So it was eye-opening.
Did you see Challengers, by the way?
To see how lonely it is.
Did you see Challengers?
I didn't see Challengers. No.
It's a little weird, but
I heard it was a little crazy.
It's a bit fluid, but there was like a moment where I was like, he's sleeping in his car because he's having to play like in futures and can't warm up, and it's like it's a whole disaster, and it's like that's exactly the case where he's trying to build his ranking back up, and he's just literally sleeping. He's like, I can't afford to do to pay for lunch or whatever, but I won, so like you owe me some money, but I just remember thinking, I'm like, this part was accurate.
Most of us started at that stage. I mean, the Andy Roddick's that shot up so quickly, maybe not, but most of us started at the future level, and we were probably sharing rooms and not having a coach and eating at
all hours of the night
food places. And it was it's how just about everyone gets that start. I actually think that's why myself, Andy, Marty, Robbie Ginepri, Toad, I think that's why we're all so close, because we kind of all started around the same time, and we were traveling to a lot of those tournaments
Robbie
together.
Ginepri, I haven't heard that name in a minute.
Robbie Ginepri, love Neps. So those guys, and we all kind of started together, and I think that helps to kind of a shared experience. I don't want to say a trauma because it was enjoyable, but a shared experience.
You were war buddies to a certain degree. It's sort of like, you go through a really, war buddy, I use that term loosely, but it's a really uncomfortable experience where you sort of like bond together. When you were talking about, beating up on Andy and Andy beating up on you, he talked about that in the documentary with Marty, that there's this like next level, like you have to be a savage. Like in order to be the best athlete in the world, you have to have that fire. Like Serena Williams, I'm going to rip your throat out. Like it's the gladiator in the arena. So it's like sometimes I feel when people are expecting this nice and polite, athlete, I'm like, this is the gladiator. Like what? You can't have the nice, polite gladiator. That's just not.
Yeah. So did Roger. Roger was very calm on court, but he absolutely wanted to rip your throat out. Oh, he was, these guys are all, to get there, you're right. You have to be absolutely savage. You have to want to win worse than the next guy. And myself and Andy were no different. We wanted to just we practiced so hard in those Davis Cup weeks that if I saw him do something extra, I was going to do something extra. If he saw me do something extra, he wasn't going to let me outwork him. I wasn't going to let him outwork me.
That's amazing.
And those guys, Roger, Rafa, Novak, they're the same. They want to beat you, but they can be polite off the court, which I feel like I was. I feel like I tried to be as polite as I could off the court, but then people maybe expected me to be entirely polite on the court, and I wasn't always. It definitely wasn't close.
You're like, no.
Because that's where you're just doing everything you can to win. You're trying to figure out what you can do, and you're going through all these emotions and highs and lows of a match, of a game, of everything going on, and you're trying to deal with that as best as you can to win the match. And some are better at it than others. Part of the talent level, or part of what makes each player individual. But I mean, Roger looked so calm when he was playing. And even when you're playing him, if you're in the locker room beforehand, it honestly looks like he's sitting at a coffee shop, just relaxing. But then the second he steps on the court, he is going a million miles an hour, and he is ready to beat you. And then it's over, and back to chatting like it's a coffee. Like, I've played him in, I don't know, 3 or 4 finals. And
you beat him.
After the match, we're talking like in, with holding the trophies, and he's talking like we didn't just play a match. Like, what are you going to do, this off season? You plan on doing anything with your wife? What are you at? I'm like, I hate you right now. You just beat me. I don't want to talk to you. But he's just so friendly and very, very casual and likable, and it's great. But I mean, and Rafa's the same. Rafa is so good in his press conferences afterwards, like being very diplomatic about winning, losing, whatever. Obviously, he won way more than he lost. But even when he lost, a few times I beat him, he had very nice things to say in the press conference, but also very realistic. Like, hey, he played great today. I'm not going to take anything away from him. And of course, he wants to go out and play that match again right now, and he wants to beat me as bad as he can. But off the court, you can be polite. On the court, it's totally different. Yeah.
And what was the biggest challenge you faced that you didn't expect getting into this?
For me, the biggest challenge, which is part of the reason I was done. I mean, the big reason I was done was my body was starting to break down, but the travel. I did not love the travel. If I could do every tournament from Tampa or Fairfield, Connecticut, I would like to think that I would have had a couple more years on tour. I would have battled through my injuries and my body breaking down. But living on the road, it's such a just weird dynamic. Like you said, you were in Italy for a month, and that sounds amazing for anyone listening to this. Would be like, oh, how could you not love being in Italy for a month?
Because you don't get to see the sights because you're constantly playing. You're playing from one tennis tournament to like another, or one match to another. Your body hurts. You can't walk. You can't move. And then you have to go train, and you're seeing what everyone else is doing. You're like, wait, you're working out after the match? I just played 2 matches and you're working out? And then shit, you got to get back on a bike. And then you're like, I have to work out? And you're like, what?
Just going from hotel to courts. That's like, it. I didn't see a sight. My wife, when I first started dating my wife when I was still on tour, and she had the same idea. Like, oh wait, are you really complaining about going to Rome? I'm like, yeah, come with me, come see what it's like. And after like 2 or 3 trips, she's like, yeah, I see. We did nothing. We didn't go see the sights. No. We went to the courts. No. We ate the same restaurant every night with your same, your trainer, Marty and his trainer maybe, and that's it. That's what we did every night. We maybe played cards in the room and then went to bed. Watched a movie, went to bed. Like, you literally don't. So all this time now, like now as an actual adult and having kids and stuff, like everyone wants to travel in the summer. It's like, oh, have you been here? Have you been here? I'm like, yeah, I've been there like 5 times. Oh, what should I do? I have no idea. But I can tell you how to get from the hotel to the courts. That's what I can tell you. I don't know what else to do there, but so it wasn't like traveling that's fun. So I got kind of tired of that by the end. And so that was probably the biggest thing that I didn't expect, because I expected, as a kid, you see this, oh my goodness, this is so glamorous. They go from London to Paris to Rome to Beijing to Melbourne. From one hotel room to another. Cool. That's it. So and then to the court. The other thing is like, okay, you're doing all those things and you have to adjust to the time difference every time and be ready to play in a day or 2. I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how Taylor Swift did it. Like, I'm like, that's when I think of like top athletes in the world who travel around the world, like tennis players, and Taylor Swift, I'm like, that's comparable. I mean, like, she's putting on a show. It's the same sort of big thing that's going to last, 3-4 hours, probably prep and the whole thing. And movies are somewhat like that too. So I feel like tennis world definitely translated to my life for movies, where it's like you go on location, or you're never
generally filming near you. So you're, you know, you get to like kind of see the sights, but like occasionally for like a day or two, but your rehearsals, your wardrobe, you know, have to like, know you're like, just, so it depends if you're number one on the call sheet. It's kind of like playing a tournament. If you're like 2 or 3 or 4, then you're like, great, I get to be the, you know, do the sights, but you have everything on your shoulders. Like the movie depends on your like success and hard work. So it's very similar. So I talk a lot about alchemizing terrible things on this podcast. So it's like whatever comes your way, you can use it as fuel and then alchemize it. And, you know, like I've had both my parents pass away, and I've had to learn get all these downloads and learn all these lessons from that, or, you know, just traumatic things can happen, but you're like, okay, what did I learn? How did I grow? What are the downloads from this? And you wrote a book, How I Lost Everything and Won My Life Back. And this is very similar to the journey that like I constantly talk about. So you went from like were you top 10 at this point before all the shit went down?
No, I wasn't. I was around 20.
So you're
25.
So you're 20 in the world, and then you have some freak accident, a fractured your neck, like you had paralysis, and then your father got sick with terminal cancer, and then shortly after his passing, probably the stress of that, you contracted shingles, like, and then your face was paralyzed. Okay, walk me through. So this is like perfect trifecta, and if anything, I mean, my God, I've had a few of those.
I would never wish it on my worst enemy, but 2004 for me was just brutal, and that's why I wrote the book. But you're right, to make the best out of the situation. I'll give the quick sort of timeline. Was in Rome, actually, played, lost my match, practiced the next day with Robbie Ginepri, and I was practicing with him, and he had a drop shot on a set point, and being a savage, I don't let that go. I'm not gonna stop. And I, unfortunately, my foot stuck in the clay, and I Supermaned into the net post. So fractured vertebrae. And I still say best thing that ever happened to me, because then I went home 2 days later, and they couldn't tell because of just the facilities they had over there. They couldn't tell if I had just broken my neck or broken my neck and my back, because I had a lot of referred pain there. But it was just my neck. But I went home, and it was when it was the last 6 weeks of my dad's life. And he was a very proud man and wouldn't have told me to come home or wouldn't have allowed me to come home because it was important times in the year.
Oh my God. God was working through the whole situation.
And spend time with him for that, to say a lot of the things that went unsaid. Both of us are kind of more actions speak louder than words, not big talkers. So to be around each other for that time was really important. And then, yes, like you said, the stress of after he passed away, a week later, I contracted shingles, and the worst place you can get it, it was my facial nerve, which paralyzed left side of my face. It messed up my hearing. I lost like half my hearing. And my vision was messed up. I was dizzy. So I could barely, it was basically like walking if you were extremely drunk. Like I couldn't walk in a straight line because it affected my inner ear. So it was pretty traumatic. And the first real visit I had to a doctor afterwards, to a specialist, he said, well, we won't be able to tell for over a month whether or not it's ever going to heal. Because if it doesn't, we can maybe try an experimental procedure where we open up your face, take a nerve out of your leg and put it in there, and maybe you'll get some of the feeling and vision and everything back. So that was pretty nerve-wracking for about a month. And then once I did start seeing some of it come back, we realized that it could take, and they said then it could take 6 months, it could take 4 years for it to come back to being fully healthy. And 4 years, of course, for a tennis player is a death sentence. They would never be able to play again after 4 years off. So luckily for me, it was only about 8 months. And I was lucky as can be that I and like you said, you try to find the positive. For me, I actually was home in Connecticut and got to see my friends that I never got to do before. All the kids I went to high school with, like I was close with them, but not to that daily life close where you get to see everything they're doing and you get to know that so-and-so's coworker is a pain in the butt and they don't like dealing with them that day. And so is their boyfriend or girlfriend is treating them like crap, or this is going on. And because when you're on the road, they don't tell you those kind of things. And I understand that because you're busy doing your thing, they're busy doing their thing. But when you're around all the time and getting to be around my friends, I got to know them so well. They got to know me so much better. And my mom, I felt like I was there for her as much as I could be. She was there for me. And so we were able to do all that kind of stuff. And I think it was my body. I mean, I do sometimes think of things happening for a reason. And my body just said, you need a break. You need mentally to be home at this time. You need to be around friends and to see what's important in life. Because those 6 months when I was home made me realize, like, if I never win another tennis match in my life, I couldn't be luckier. I've got people that care about me, whether I win another match or not. So that was really, really special for me, even though I had to go through a lot of physical pain to get that perspective. It was worth it.
Yeah. And what was your mindset? Like, how did you get yourself out of that immense hole? And how did you build your body back up? Like, what were you just enjoying life? Were you like doing exercises? What was the mindset that you had?
Yeah. So the mindset was much tougher than the physical. The mindset was uncertainty. Uncertainty is for me really difficult because I didn't know if I was going to be back in, like I said, 6 months or 4 years. So am I going to really try? Am I going to try to train? Am I going to try to do something even though I can barely walk? Am I going to try to figure out a way to get back on court, or am I going to just say, forget it, I'm going back to Harvard? And that was when I actually toyed with the idea of writing a book. I was like, you know what, maybe I should write. And I thought about writing a children's book. And I went to my agent and said, hey, let me start putting some stuff down. Let's see if and I met with a literary agent and they said, don't write a children's book. That's way too hard. There's like 10 children's books writers in the whole world, and they do everyone else's, they ghostwrite everyone else's. So forget doing that.
Oh, wow.
If you want to write a book, write a real book. So I thought about that. And then as I started getting better, my friends were great because it was not really enjoyable. I had half a face. Marty can tell you about that. Actually, he thought it was hilarious. He was one of my other great friends that could make me laugh, even though you're dealing with
he would totally give you shit. He would totally.
Oh gosh. He used to smack me in the face and say, can you feel that? And I'm like, it's all right. Stop doing that. It's not funny anymore. But that's how you know you're true friends. My closest friend in the world probably walked into the hospital room, and I had IVs going. But my face was half paralyzed, so like would not move. This eye was like pinned open like that. It wouldn't move. He took one look at me and fell on the ground laughing, and I was like, "Thank you. Like you're so close to me that you can do that." That this is just laughable. I can laugh about it instead of crying. So
honestly, that's the best. That is the best because that's actually probably laughter.
They kept me doing that. They kept me laughing. They kept me enjoying it, even though. And I still remember the first time they like kind of forced me to go out. Once I started getting my bearings back a little bit, I was able to walk a little better. I was able to kind of be out and about a little bit. And they just took me out to like the local hole in the wall bar, and we just sat in the corner, had some beers, and they were like, we're so happy to just have you out. And I initially kind of resisted. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be out. I still looked funny. I don't want to do that. And just going out and relaxing and hanging out with them, I was like, it meant so much to me that they were really trying to get me out of my shell, to just say, hey, you got to go out again. You got to be out in society. You got to just interact. So I did. And then it kind of, I don't know, just steamrolled that I was, okay, I got a little more confidence. I got back, and maybe I can get back out on the court soon, or even if I can't, I can get in the gym.
How did you
back.
heal?
And then getting back physically.
Yeah.
That was fun. I absolutely love getting back physically.
Wow.
Because, I mean, for me to get back, and you feel like there's improvement because, your body's deteriorated a little bit when you've taken that much of a rest. So to get it back and feel like you're making progress, of course, that's very different now. I'm 45. Back then I was 24. You build that muscle a lot quicker. You get that endurance a lot quicker. You get everything back a lot faster. But once I did that, man, I felt like, all right, I'm seeing these gains. I'm seeing the progress. I'm seeing what I'm doing every day when I'm putting in this hard work. That to me was so much fun. I absolutely love the feeling of getting better. And then it was tangible. You could see the results like day in, day out.
And so with your neck, so what was paralyzed, and how, like, did they say you would never play tennis again? And then how did you overcome that?
No, actually, the funny thing is the neck was way less serious than the shingles. The neck, I was back in about 2 months from once I did that. But what I think about as well, like things happen for a reason. I basically, like I said, I Superman into a net post, and at the last second, I turned my head like that, and I hit my neck right there. And when I came back to the States, and they did a bunch of X-rays, hospital for special surgery in New York, and they looked at it. The first doctor that came in said, "Was this a car accident? This looks like a car accident."
Wow.
I said, "No, it was I hit this net post." He said, "You hit the net post on your neck, and it did this." And he looked at the X-ray and everything in the scan, and he said, "If you hit on the top of your head, if you hit any part of your head on the net post, we would never be talking about tennis. We'd be debating whether or not you'd ever walk, and probably not." So I said, "Well, that's something that happened for a reason. All I did was turn my head,
God.
and that saved me from being paralyzed for the rest of my life." So that's a positive. So when I got back to being physically okay from that, it was only about 2 months, because it was just a matter of that bone. It was just a fracture in it, but that bone healing. And then once it was strong enough to withstand the force that I was playing with, it was okay to go play. But then the shingles, when they said that hit me, if I hadn't gotten to the hospital right away, and gotten all the treatment, the antibiotics and everything right away, they said that nerve would have died. And then that would have been probably a lifetime of having half a face.
Oh my God.
So again, just very lucky. And that came down to the ear, nose, and throat guy giving me his cell phone number, because I went in. It was the first time my coach tells the story. I was practicing with him, and I was excited to be back playing, but my head felt like it was in a vice. And I was like, "Brian, I can't, it hurts too much. Every step I take, it hurts to practice. I have to stop." And he's like, "You need to go see someone. You've never stopped to practice in your entire life, ever. So you need to go see someone." So I went to see a doctor, and he gave me his cell phone number, and I didn't know why, but I didn't think anything. "Okay, great, no problem. Thank you." He gave me some antibiotics. The next morning I woke up and my face was paralyzed. So I called him. He's like, "I was afraid this is a possibility. Meet me at the emergency room." So I went to the emergency room, and if he hadn't called me, I wouldn't have known what to do. I would have been calling around doctors. I would have figured, and if I didn't have that time and I didn't get there quick enough, there's a chance it could have been paralyzed forever. So, like I said, luckily things happen for a reason. I can't say I'm that. Everything's come back to looking that nice anyway, but it's better than it would have been.
Wow. What did you discover about yourself while you were going through this?
I discovered, for one thing, I think I discovered was that I absolutely love having close friendships. The people that mean a lot to me, and how much I want to be a part of their lives, and I want them to be a part of my life, and how much of a difference it makes when you've got close friendships, not acquaintances. Because that was the other thing. That was one thing I learned, was when I was down and off the tour, and you see the same people in the locker rooms every single week. It's like going to the office, and you see the same people, and it made me realize those are acquaintances, because not one of them checked in on me. Wow. Andy did, Marty did, Neps did, the Bryan brothers did. So those are friends. And my friends at home that didn't play tennis, didn't know anything about tennis, but cared about me, those are friends. Everyone else is acquaintances. And that's great. You need to have acquaintances. You got to have, coworkers, people you're friendly with. But those people that are close to me, those are the ones that I would do anything for. And I realized that they would do anything for me, and how important that was in life. Because I think when you're playing tennis, you're so isolated, like we talked about, that you kind of live in a bubble. And so some of those relationships get really shortchanged. And so for me to take time off and realize there is a huge world outside of the tennis world. So you need to be aware of all those people and all those things. And when I went back on tour, I went back to being isolated, because you have to be so singularly focused on the sport. For me, at least, I'll speak for myself, not for everyone, but I had to be so singularly focused on that to get the most out of it, to feel like I succeeded in tennis, because that's all I wanted to do, was get the most out of my talent, to get the most out of my abilities, not necessarily to be number 1 in the world or be number 10 in the world or be number 100. I just want to get the most out of what I can do. And I had to be that way, but it opened my eyes to the big world outside of it. And for that not to be scary, for that not to be something to worry about, because I've got close friends, I've got close ties that will always be there for me. And that made a huge difference for me, to know that there are people out there that care about me outside of tennis. Because I think, sadly, there's a lot of tennis players that don't know that only know their value based on the number by their name. If they're ranked 5 in the world, they feel great. If they're ranked 100 in the world, they feel terrible. And you have to remember you're the same person, and you have to have some people in your life that treat you exactly the same if you're number 1 or if you're number 1,000. And for me to see that and be around those kind of people, it just reassured me that that's more important than the number next to my name.
Yeah. How did you learn to separate your worth from your performance and your identity as a tennis player? Because did you think to yourself, oh shit, like I might never play again? Like there's there's, like with your face paralyzed, and when you're in it, you're thinking, no, this is probably what it's going to be. Like this too shall pass, but you don't know, you're like, I don't know. Like this is maybe the new normal. So how did you collapse your identity with that? How did you separate your worth from performance? And what part of you needed to die in order for this whole new version of you to emerge?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, was that a part of me had to die. I had to think about, if I was, like I said, I thought about going back to school. I thought about what life would be like. And there were many nights. I wouldn't say, this is in one of those, like, if it was in a movie, the time lapse, it would go very quickly. There'd be that, like,
the montage
6 months later and just like right to that. But if you think about those 6 months, there's a lot of nights by yourself where you're just in bed thinking, because I was not sleeping very well. So you're just thinking. And I was thinking, can I be happy? Can I still be happy if I go back to school and I'm a normal kid and maybe my face is a little jacked up, but I'm learning and I'm maybe going to go into finance, or am I going to write books? Am I going to do something different? Am I never going to play tennis again? Can I be happy? And I had to kind of wrestle with that for a while. And that's where I did see the importance of having those friends and saying, you know what, it made me realize I can. And I can be happy if I never played another tennis match. I feel very, very fortunate, unbelievably grateful that I was able to get back and play better tennis than I ever was before, and have the career that I had, have the success, meet the people I've gotten to meet my wife, everything I did on tour. I'm so lucky, but I don't know if I would have been able to do that, to be able to succeed, if I never accepted the fact that I'd be happy even if that didn't happen, because it gave me a better mentality. We talked about the mental side, how much that meant and how much that can separate you. I don't know if my mental strength would have been as good if I didn't have that break when I was 24 years old, if I didn't take that time off where it was taken from me and there was a chance I would never play again. Because when you're 22, 23 years old, you feel invincible. You feel like this is going to last forever. I'm going to have 15 more years on tour.
Crazy, yeah.
This is, I'm living the dream life, a little ups and downs, but, this is a charmed life. I'm going to be fine. When it was taken away and there's a real possibility it's never coming back, well, now I got to take every match, every tournament like it's a sprint, and this could be over tomorrow. So let's enjoy this, and let's take some time to appreciate how lucky I am and the things I'm doing. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're just smelling the flowers and you're just happy to be there. I wanted to win every match. That was never going to be taken away from me. It was that my competitiveness was going to be there every single day, practice, match, whatever. But it was a different sort of urgency because this might end. So I might as well go out and do the best I can every single day and put it all on the line. So it was great for me to, like you said, for a part of me to die. And that part of me was the feeling of invincibility. That completely died because it was a much more realistic me after that incident, after those sort of triumvirate of awful things happening to me. Yeah.
So it sounds like you came into gratitude. Like it brought you closer with yourself, brought you closer with family, and you had a real sense of gratitude of, instead of being like, oh, this is always available. Oh, this is always here.
Yep.
And then you're like, there was like a big Marvel project that I did, and I thought it was Jessica Jones. It was a big Marvel, like it was number one on Netflix. And I'm thinking, I'm like, this is my break. This is, and thinking that we would all just like launch out and here it is. And, and I remember feeling that sense of like confidence or cockiness of like, I've finally arrived. And then it didn't quite happen. Like, I mean, it was very successful, but it didn't like none of us were really launched from the show, which is strange, but like we were just sort of like, what? And so then it was like, it was very humbling. So.
But then it gives you gratitude for the next one. It gives you gratitude for the next opportunity when it comes to know that it's not given.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened when I didn't work for like a few years after that. And I was like, oh, can I be happy? Can I can I, do something different? Like what am I going to do and sort of accept? I'm like, well, I had a good run. There was, I don't know. I did like 30, 40 projects. That's pretty good. And
I'm amazed in the acting thing, how that can turn on just like a knife's edge. It can be, well, I had a good run and I'm done. And then like one little thing, you get one break that turns, and then you've got a 30-year career after that.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be ready to be out of the business entirely.
Yeah.
The superstar on every red carpet and in every casting list imaginable. I would have such a tough time, I think, with such a subjective field where if someone likes you in this, then they'll hire you for this. And it's not just you
hard
go out
work.
and you win. Yeah, you go out and you win, and they have to take you. They have to put you on center court the next time because you won. This is if you won the match, but the other one looked kind of better and did it a little more stylish, then they're going to advance. Wait, no, I was better. So I would have such a tough time doing what you do.
Yeah, because you have less control, which is,
absolutely.
There's so much less control, which is like what I've had to. And so like podcasting is definitely like, these are telling stories and trying to understand what we are and human consciousness. So it's like, it's why I got into like the storytelling business in the first place, was to like tell stories and understand and connect. And so this is like an adjacent form of that. But yeah, did you, when you were going through, like, you were known for grit on the tennis court, but during your personal life, during this like really, really hard time, did you, like how did you experience that grit, and how did that translate into your life during the most like lowest points of your life? Like where did that grit show up?
It showed up once like I said, building back physically. The mental part was tougher, but building back physically, it was a struggle at first because, like I said, my balance was really messed up. My vision was messed up. So the first time I went out to try to hit, I was hitting with my coach, who doesn't hit the ball very hard, but just keeps it in play. And I genuinely was scared because I felt like the ball was coming too fast and I couldn't pick it up. And I was nervous that I was going to get hit. I couldn't take a volley because if I was up at net, I felt like I was going to get hit because I could not pick the ball up. So for me to think, okay, I can do this, and I can go from this, which from the outside looking in would look like pretty much a beginner playing again. I'm going to go from this to making this my job again very soon. I had to have a bit of a disconnect with that kind of a lofty goal. So my coach and I had quite a few conversations after 5 minutes of hitting and me being so frustrated that I couldn't see the ball, of what can we do today to make it better for tomorrow? And if that's hitting for 5 more minutes, that's hitting for 5 more minutes. And then the next day, if it's a little better and I can last 15 minutes and I can go and I can actually hit a couple volleys or something, that's what it is. So we have to be okay with every single day, what can we do that's going to get me a little better? And sometimes I was, yesterday we did too much and I'm tired and I can't do anything and I can barely walk down from my house down to the end of the street. So we need to take a rest today. And that's what's best for me to be better for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And we have to set these like really, really micro goals of what we can do today. And I remember thinking about that. And then once things started progressing, you start, you don't forget about that, but you start thinking about real goals. Okay, when can I play this tournament? How am I going to do in this tournament? Where am I playing next? All this kind of stuff. And before you know it, a year later, playing as well as I've ever played in the US Open and playing Andre in the quarters. And like, if I had thought that I would be winning titles back in the US Open quarterfinals, doing these things a year earlier, I think it would have seemed like Mount Everest. And you can't, I couldn't think that way. So my grit had to be in the daily wins. Every day I can figure out something that's going to make me better. So why not just do that instead of thinking about so far out of the realm of possibility where I could say, you know what, I can barely hit the ball. I can barely see right now. A year from now, I'm going to be a couple points away from being in the US Open semifinals. That's crazy. So let's think about what I can do today to get me anywhere close to that.
And what were some of the lies your mind would tell you? Because like our minds can play like tricks on us, and like, you know, you have like the angel and the devil of just like, you could do it, you're amazing, fuck you, you're nothing, you're gonna be paralyzed, Marty's gonna slap you in the face again and be like, bitch, you can't, can you feel this? Like, so what were the lies that you had to overcome?
Well, I was
that you told yourself
way too optimistic. So I remember my coach actually came with that first meeting I had with a specialist where he told me, okay, this is what we're going to see, and we can't tell for a month. And he went through I was talking to him for an hour and a half, probably, all these questions. My coach had a million questions. What can he do to make this better? What can't he do? What's healthy for him? What's dangerous? We were going through everything. And what I heard, we got out of the doctor's office. We're walking, and I immediately pulled up my phone and said, okay, 6 months from today, this is the tournament. And Brian just my coach looked at me and goes, is that the only thing you heard out of that entire conversation? Was that 6 months is the fastest you could possibly get back, and maybe you could play in 6 months? He's like, did you not hear the 4 years part? The fact that this could be that long, and the fact that it might be an experimental procedure to maybe make you better. All you heard was the absolute best case scenario and assumed that's going to be you. And I was like, yeah, doesn't everyone do it that way? Like, you assume I'm going to be as good or better than anyone else has ever done this. So I'm going to be that. I'm going to be ready in 6 months. And he just looked at me and laughed. He's like, okay. Like, I guess that's what we'll think about.
But weren't you?
You need to also be realistic about the rest of this and not set your sights on that. So he was always the realistic one. I was the one that was like, nope, I'm going to do it better than anyone's done it.
Is that the case? I mean, 8 months was still.
I was back in about 8 months, yeah. So, but it was laughable. Looking back, it was laughable because that was when I would maybe be okay. So I was just okay to play, but I was in no shape to actually play on tour. I was ready to maybe win a high school match at that point, but I wasn't ready to be competing with the top players in the world. So it took me about 8 months, and even when I got back on tour, I was ready, kind of, but there were still lapses of like losing it in lights, of having issues, and I don't think I was really ready for a year and a half. So, but I was just happy to be back out there. So it was good for me to be out there, even if I wasn't 100%.
Wow. And what was the procedure that you had to do in order for them to fix it? And was it just sort of like, it's kind of like an injury, like a back injury or like any other injury? Is that kind of how it was? Because I'm trying to understand like how.
Yeah, it was a little different. But they didn't have to do the surgery. That was if we had to wait a month to see if there was any. So apparently your nerve repairs at 1 millimeter a day.
Mm-hmm.
So until it started repairing itself, it would take about a month for that millimeter to go for there to be any sort of movement at all. And that movement would be like, the tiniest little, like your eyelid might flicker a tiny bit, or your lip might go up when you smile because it was frozen. And so half of my lip would go up and the other half would be frozen. So if there would be like a little, tiny little movement, that's how they knew that it was actually healing. So that took about a month for there to be any movement whatsoever. Once that happened, then it was just a matter of time. It was taking antibiotics. I was on prednisone. I was on a bunch of stuff just to calm everything down. And then once we knew it was getting better, then it was just time. It was waiting to see how it would recover. And that's where 23, 24-year-old kid, you think, well, I can figure out a way to make it better. You can't heal a nerve any faster. A nerve is just going to take that long to heal. So it was frustrating because, in an injury, you can do rehab, you can do PT, you can get treatment on it, you can do all those things, you can ice it. I couldn't do anything with this. So it forced patience. And I always felt like I was very patient. This was testing that very much so, with the fact that I just couldn't I couldn't do anything that was going to make it better. So it was just, they said, okay, well, if you get a good night's sleep, rest helps, trying to de-stress, bless you.
Thank you.
But so, yeah, so there was nothing that I could do that would really help, aside from just living my life. So it was to me, that was different than an injury, because an injury, you still always have to feel extremely responsible for your rehab. And with this, it was more like, just try to relax. And that's tough to do as an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, cause I feel like I realized, like, coming out of being an athlete, I was like an adrenaline junkie, or an emotional adrenaline junkie, because it was sort of like this fix of like, what's going to happen? Like, am I going to win or lose? It's going to be like life or death. And I feel like, as athletes, it's like, when we're like in that mindset, then it's sort of like it's like the voice is suddenly quiet. It's like everything gets very quiet. It's like, then you get to just focus at like the task at hand, and, then you're in it, and it kind of like can be very calming. Did you use like visualization at all, like during like being an athlete? Like, and did you also use that for your recovery, or did you just completely, because like, Agassi would, visualize entire matches in their head? Yeah.
So I used it when I was playing, for sure. That was always kind of a requirement. Was my coach and I would talk, we'd go over the scouting report, we'd talk maybe after our warm up. And then I just needed really 5 to 10 minutes of isolation, just on my own, whether it's in the corner of a locker room, whether it's walking down the hall, whatever, maybe headphones on. But all I would do is picture sort of the ideal outcome, starting out, executing plan A, and going from start to finish. And that's how we want it to be. And then you go through, okay, what's going to happen if this hurdle comes up? If they counter that and they're playing well and they're doing this, and they're affecting me this way, how am I gonna turn that around? How am I gonna change that outcome? Then I think about what's the worst case that could happen. Okay, they're playing unbelievable. I'm struggling with this. What am I gonna do then to disrupt their rhythm, and just kind of go through the scenarios of what could happen, so that now that I've got that in my head, I can see all of it. None of it, even the worst case scenario, isn't the worst thing in the world. So be accepting of that. And now once I walk on the court, anything that comes up, I've kind of already visualized this. So now what am I going to do? Because back then we couldn't get coached on tour. Now you can, but I had no one else out there. So I had to go through all this in my head, talk to my coach about it, and then go out there. And no matter what happens, I'm the one that has to solve that problem. I'm the one that has to deal with it going perfect, it going kind of mediocre, or it going terrible. And how am I going to change that to always get it as close as it possibly can to going perfect? So I'd always try to visualize that. I needed about 10 minutes, and then that would kind of calm me. That would get me in the right frame of mind, so that now I'm not walking out there nervous. I'm not walking out there thinking like there's all this pressure on the road, because I've already just kind of seen what could happen. Now let's go out there and actually just execute it.
That's awesome. And what was the emotional cost of all your success and fame? And you were the behind Arthur Ashe, the first African-American, like after him, to have this, a lot on your shoulders riding for, like, when I was watching King Richard, also, it was like the speech he gave to Venus. He's like, you're not just, you're not just out there for you. You're out there for every other girl out there.
Yeah. And that was tough for me to accept initially, because one of the first times I had any little success, I played a long match with Leighton Hewitt the year he won the U.S. Open in the second round, and I got some notoriety. It was a nationally televised match and everything. And then the next week, I got a call from the FBI saying there's been threats to your mom at her work about a mixed race, and my father's black, and calling her an N-word lover, and we know where you live, and we're going to kill your family. And so now I'm thinking I'm not the same as everyone else out there. Andy and Marty are my best friends on tour, but they're not dealing with this after one win. And so I gotta be, and I hearken back to Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier and having to have that stiff upper lip. You have to act a certain way. You can't fight back. And for me, I wanted to I wanted to then take that role model role seriously, because I wanted kids to look up and say, hey, this is a guy doing it the right way, putting in the hard work. And so I had to think about that. And it was a lot. I mean, that's a lot to be on the shoulders of a 20-year-old. I see now how much that happens with social media. I'm lucky. I feel very happy I wasn't in the social media age, because now that happens daily to these guys. They lose a match and they've got 10 death threats from these gamblers that just want to tear them down. So I'm glad I wasn't in that, because that one time it happening was enough for me to say, okay, this is serious, and for the FBI to take it as seriously, because they knew where we lived. And so those kind of things made it very real. And I had to realize that, like, there's good and bad with the situation I'm in. I'm also so lucky. I get to go to work in a t-shirt and shorts. I get to get paid a lot of money. I get to be with my friends. I get to compete in something I love. And the downside is you become public. And I had to accept that from an early age, and I was always fine with it. Once that happened, I was fine with anything being public. Any skeletons I have in my closet, I brought them out myself. So that's okay. The one time I ever had an issue with all of this was the media, when they found out that my dad was sick, and someone found it out from a locker room conversation, not anyone saying anything public. And then they published it. And that pissed me off, because it was my dad. It's not me. Anything that you want to say about me, fine. But my dad never signed up for this. He didn't say he was part of the public eye or anything like that. And he hadn't told a lot of the people that he worked with that he was sick. And so that really pissed me off. And so that was the cost. That was actually probably the biggest cost I ever faced from media, was that they got into my parents' lives.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Did you sort of like, how did you move forward and handle that? Did you sort of let the racket do the talking, so to speak?
Yeah. I wanted to do that. Like I said, I wanted to be a role model. I wanted to let the racket do the talking and show the right way to do things. And then, kind of, I don't want to say take the high road, but go about it in a way that I could be proud of, and that hopefully others could be proud of. And that was why it was the biggest compliment ever, when parents would say, oh, I want my kid to be like you, or your parents did a great job with you, with, being polite, being, I don't know, congenial off the court, being a nice person. Just that kind of stuff. I wanted to have that, and that made it that much more important, because I saw that there were so many more eyes. There might be more eyes on me, especially back when I had the braids and dreads and stuff, and there might be more eyes on me than someone else that didn't look like me, or that didn't have the same background that I had. So, and I knew that I should have known that better. I knew that from juniors, when there was a lot of talk, a lot of whether it's resentment or frustration or whatever with someone that looked different. I should have recognized that probably earlier on, but it took some eye-opening experiences for that to really sink in, that I needed to be, if I'm going to look different, maybe I needed to act a little different as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, James, this has been just an absolute joy, and thank you so much for your wisdom and your light, and yeah, I mean, that's a wild thing to sort of, I don't know, you feel like I feel like you've handled this really well with grace, all the, the trials and the tribulations of just kind of it almost is I know probably when you were going through it, it didn't feel that way, but it's sort of you handled it with such grace. And I feel like even, just even from talking to you about oh, you were 4 in the world, but it was just oh yeah, it wasn't your identity, where I feel a lot of athletes, it's if they didn't win, or they their life was over and they didn't win another, they've only won a couple Grand Slams, or it's oh no, what is life? Yeah. I feel that's cool, that it's because there is so much after life that happens of being an athlete. It's you have, these years, and then, well, okay, that was part of the journey, and then there's more of the journey.
The biggest goal, which I told reporters a ton of times and they hated the answer, was that my goal was that when I put my rackets down, I'm happy and content, and I know I did my best, because it's a long life after tennis. And that's why I sleep well at night, and I'm happy that I had the career that I had, and I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I know I know I had my my faults when I was on tour. I know I got to 4, never got to 1, never got, but I did my best. And so the rest of my life, I can say that. And I know there's a lot of athletes that don't feel that way, and I feel sorry for them. I wish them to not have those regrets, but I don't have those. So I feel very, very lucky. And I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish on tour, which was to do my best. And I got the most out of a body that I don't think was built for pro sports, but it made it 14 years. So I'll take it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching.
A Whole Nother Level.